And I'm Kat, and welcome to the Crime Chat. I am your forensic femme fatale. Natalie is your true crimatic connoisseur.
We're just two normal girls obsessed with dark crimes, evil minds, and occasionally the unknown.
And here is your disclaimer, chatters. The following Crime Chat will contain adult content, and it will be very violent scenarios today.
Oh,
so,
boy.
I mean, just look at the heading. No pun intended. But your listener discretion is advised.
Well, you have been warned. And before we get into today's Crime Chat, Kat, what have you done?
Got to start The Last of Us. We did watch the first episode. I think the second one's out now. I haven't watched the second one, but it's interesting. I didn't realize that 5 years was going to pass between the first season and the second season. So, what's her? Not Bella's her real name, Bella Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of it right now. Anyway, so she's older. I think 19 now, and while he's not the dad, he's a father figure. So it's just interesting. It's an interesting dynamic to see at that age, and I think they nailed it because it's very typical, the mid-teens and then to the 19, like everything.
Yeah.
Everything. You couldn't tell me I didn't know everything at that age.
Yeah,
gosh.
and I can see her playing like a really great dysfunctional adolescent. I could see her being a problem teen. She's got the right face for it,
Yeah. And then kind of around that, while we were waiting for it to start, we started watching reruns of House.
Oh, yeah.
I love House.
Love him.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's really, really good. Like the medical conditions. And I remember watching it like when it came out and really liking it, but the medical conditions and stuff that they do, there was one that she couldn't fall asleep and she was awake for like 11 days, like 10 or 11 days.
Mm-hmm.
And her body was trying to sleep. So when she did fall asleep, I can't even say fell asleep because her eyes were wide open, but she had REM going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started getting like these rashes. She told her partner that she was allergic to dogs when her partner brought a dog home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the dog came from somewhere and brought the Black Plague with it.
Oh, that's a real case, though. So he does do real cases. He's like SVU, special visit. They kind of like emulate like real stuff that goes on. I think he does the same thing. I've heard of that in real life.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that kind of started because we started watching The Pit. Have you heard of The Pit?
No.
Okay. Noah Wyle was on ER back in the day with George Clooney, the whole cast. Well, he started another ER-related series. It's on either Starz or HBO. It's on one of those like premium channels. And it's amazing. It's so good. And I'm like, he just fit right back in that role. Like nothing changed.
Really?
Yeah. And it was really good. It's very, it's dramatized and everything like that. It's just interesting. And I remember before then hearing about how good it was. Thinking in the back of my head, I'll probably watch that at some point. And Chris had it on one day. So you know who Noah Wyle is, yeah?
I do not.
Oh.
I never got into those doctor shows.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm married to a first responder. That's all he wanted to watch, apparently, lately, so.
I think one time we watched that show, that fireman show. It was with
Chicago PD? Or Chicago SD? Dennis Leary.
I remember we watched one episode and Vinny was screaming at the TV, like, that's not legit. That doesn't happen. I'm like, all right, calm down.
We have the whole series on DVD. It's one of Chris's favorite shows. I'm sitting in the living room the other day. Everything you can get streaming, right?
Yes.
You can rent stuff, and you pay for it.
Yeah.
So tell me why we have 2 towers of DVDs still in our living room where I'm like, can we just get rid of them? He's like, but he's like, he could be a very sentimental person. Like, what if?
Yeah. What if what?
What if something happens? And I don't know, apocalypse. And I'm like, well, if the apocalypse happens, we're not going to have power. He's like, but we'll have a generator. And he's like, if the generators can do it. And I'm like, well, what about the gas? You're going to run out of gas eventually. He's like, well, then we'll go get gas. We'll develop solar power. It was this whole thing. So I just gave up. Anyway, that's about it. How about you?
So, okay, 2 things. Well, of course, I've been keeping up on my farm.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, that's all taken care of. I got 71 acres of corn. That's good. It's actually really fun. I'm telling you. I'm going to record myself doing it, and you can see what it's like. It's actually really fun. But did you know that they're coming out? I don't know the name of the movie, but it doesn't look very good.
Mm-hmm.
But the girl from Grey's Anatomy, the lead, she's starring in a movie about Natalia Grace.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I saw a preview for it.
Yeah. And it looks cheesy as hell. Like, I first of all, I love the actress. I think she's amazing. But I'm like, it just seemed beneath her. Like this, like, not the role. I think this movie, the parts that I saw in it, they kind of didn't nail the Natalia character.
Okay.
And then when I watched it, like the preview, I'm like, I'm feeling like creepy Hallmark, and I should be feeling like orphan vibes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. But then again, I'm just prejudging it. It's not out yet. I will give it a chance. And the other thing is, so remember I told you about the stone tape theory?
Right.
Okay. So of course, I was reading up on that again.
Yeah.
And there was I want to say there's another theory called the string theory. I can't recite names. I can't think of the person who said it. But what they said was, what people need to understand about ghosts and like energy and what lays in the great beyond is that if ghosts have been here forever, you know, and everything has a soul, remember that, like, you know, there was at one point humans or living beings did not have eyeballs.
Oh.
He's like, so to think that if it's there, of course you're going to see it, or you only confirm things that you can visually see. He's like, is it inaccurate fundamentally? Because we didn't always have these eyes. And before then, they still existed.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, that's a very good point.
Yeah. You know what? Okay, so when you said no eyes, my brain automatically went to the Descent movies.
Yes, that's a great fucking. You know, the first time I saw that movie, I was actually in Siesta Key at the condo. I watched that movie.
Oh, yeah?
We had a DVD. I think this DVD is still there, actually.
Yeah, I've got them on DVD, too. That's one of the many.
That's a great... They had a follow-up movie on that, like The Ascent, from the Descent.
No, well, I had Descent and Descent 2. I own both of them, and I think there was a Descent 3.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. I gotta check.
I could be wrong.
All right.
Either that, or I'm thinking of I Spit on Your Grave series. We've got all three of them.
That movie. Yeah, there's good ones out there.
Okay, so real quick.
Yeah.
My whole argument about like just getting rid of the DVDs is he wants to rent or buy a movie that we already have, and I'm like, it's
streaming.
But he's like, but this way, it's like you know, it's just a button. You don't have to like get up and put it. And I'm like, you've just proved my point. Anyway,
you take that movie and you throw it out, and you're like, okay, that's it. All right. Well, that's about it. That's all I did.
Yeah.
So you asked me to do an intro on a fun topic, beheading.
Yeah.
You just give me an intro on beheading. I'm like,
yeah, baby. Okay. Yeah.
You can't get any darker than that. Okay. So here it is. Beheading. I mean, the name speaks for itself. You really don't need anything to describe it. You don't. It kind of just beheading.
You once had a head, and now it's begone.
Now it's gone. Now it's begone. But where did it begin? And why did people ever decide that cutting off somebody's head in the name of justice was a good thing? So this goes
back a while.
Yeah, it does. Okay. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, this is a short story of beheading from its origins to its place in history today. So now, the first recorded instance of beheading as an execution method comes from ancient Mesopotamia, where talking around 2000 BCE, very long time ago, in the city of back then, the laws were, as you know, brutal. They had a lot of sacrifices, especially of children and animals. Beheading was reserved for slaves and lower class. It was quick, effective, and by their standards, it was actually less cruel than what they would normally do to the children. I know. So you were kind of getting off easy. Yeah. In 1772 BCE in Babylon, King Hammurabi wrote one of the earliest laws that spelled out the capital punishment, which included beheading for crimes like theft or rebellion, which is really nothing.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking theft. I mean,
cut off the hands, right?
Cut off the hand. Yeah, that must have come after.
Yeah.
Off with the head.
Beheading wasn't random. It was seen as control. It was almost like it was a state-sanctioned punishment. They wanted to control the mass. I think it was controlling the mob of people. They wanted to strike fear in their hearts. Now, in ancient Greece, beheading was usually reserved for citizens, seen as more honorable death than crucifixion or stoning, which were often for slaves and foreigners. Socrates, though forced to drink poison, lived in the time where beheading was used to deal with certain crimes like treason and murder. Then came Rome. Of course, Rome. Roman citizens sentenced to death were often beheaded with a heavy axe. This was considered a fast and dignified way to die. But if you weren't a citizen, you were crucified, or even worse. I mean, you could have been strapped to the wheel. You could have been, what's the other one?
The torture wheel.
Or disemboweled. Like the guy, what's his name? From Wallace. William Wallace from Scotland.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking the torture thing where you had the, not machete, but like the blade swinging.
Ooh,
it was on Edgar Allan Poe, the show that they did.
Yes, I don't know
you know
the name of that, but yes, they used to cut people in half. They used to cut people in half.
But the thing is, like, it would go and it would just, so it would go a little deeper, like with every swing, but they could also stop it. But even if they stopped it, can you imagine just the...
No, it's...
I mean, your guts could literally just fall out.
Yeah, but that's what they wanted. They wanted to cut you in half. And if you ever watch that movie Braveheart, they do it at the end of the movie where and everything was like accurate to William Wallace's story, where they took out his insides and he was alive. He was screaming, freedom, you know, and then it's been
so long since I've seen it. I don't really remember that part, actually.
Okay, when I watched it, the most powerful scene in that movie, and they had a bunch of great scenes, but the most powerful scene is when do you remember the Queen? Beautiful. She was the young French princess that married the king in Scotland at that point, or England, and she walked over to the king son who she married, and the king was sitting there, and he had a stroke, so he couldn't speak. He was in bed, he couldn't move. And this was later on after they captured William Wallace, and she was pissed. She was pissed because she loved William Wallace. They had an affair, right? So she walked over very gracefully and she whispered in his ear, "Hey, before you die, I just want you to know that I am pregnant with William Wallace's son, and he is going to serve as king. So goodbye." I'm like, oh my God, that's so powerful. Great. All right.
Yes.
Back to the intro. Beheading became a part of the judicial system because it was clean, fast, and had a symbolic, powerful message for the people. Don't fuck around, or you'll find out. Yeah. By the Middle Ages in Europe, beheading was more ritualistic. In England, it was the execution of the nobles and royalty. So they made it more of a spectacle. They were willing to behead anybody at this point. They didn't care if you were powerful. You were up to be beheaded. The first nobleman recorded public beheading in England was in 1388, and that was Sir Simon Burley. And this was a close advisor to King Richard II. He was executed for treason. Yeah. Next was in 1536, Anne Boleyn.
Oh, yeah.
Wife of Henry VIII, was famously beheaded. She's one of the first royal women in England to face this fate. Her execution was carried out by a skilled French swordsman brought to ensure a clean and swift, head departure. Yeah. Because Henry VIII did not think that he was going to save money on this. He was just like, bring the best beheader you got. Yeah.
We're going to kind of talk about the cut later.
Oh, you just gave me chills. Okay. Now, beheading became a legal punishment for treason, heresy, crimes against the state. In many societies, it was considered more respectable than hanging or burning. Okay, I get it. I would rather be beheaded than hang or burn.
Oh, God, yeah.
Especially burn.
Well, the only thing you can hope in burning is you pass out from smoke inhalation.
Yeah, but still,
or you actually pass away.
I'm assuming that burning to death is the same as drowning to death. It is a sufferable. Your body parts have to ingest like the ash and the smoke, just like in water. You have to breathe in you have to drown. Like there's an action before you die. You have to drown.
Your lungs have to fill with water.
Right, exactly.
And you don't have gills.
Yeah, right. So that, just like filling your lungs up with smoke, I think would be just as, oh my God, yeah.
Can you, no, I can't imagine.
No,
nope.
I can't imagine. So let's fast forward to 1792, the French Revolution. Enter the guillotine.
That was going to be my question.
Where's the guillotine? Where's the
guillotine?
Dr. Joseph Ignatia Guillotine proposed a machine that would make all executions equal no matter your class. The first guillotine execution happened on April 25th, 1792 in Paris. The condemned was Nicolas Pelletier, a thief. Now, the guillotine was meant to be humane and effective and efficient. It became the symbol of revolutionary justice, but it later became a symbol of terror. Tens of thousands died by it, including King Louis and Marie Antoinette. Over time, public opinion changed. Beheadings became more barbaric, especially with the rise of human rights movements in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Now, did they, at the time too, like, I mean, I'm thinking like Game of Thrones kind of thing, like the heads were on a spike. They were on display as a deterrent.
No, I don't think that was a common use of what they did with the body parts afterwards. I think there are situations where royals or kings or barbarians did that, where they put the head on a spike. I mean, there is. I mean, the London Bridge is known for that.
Yeah.
So, like, there are situations where that occurred, but it wasn't like part of the judicial system to do that to the body parts. I think if you're going by the actual law and the way, the procedure that they put in place, we're not supposed to do that with the head.
What was it? Brian Cohey, he said within 3 hours.
Yeah.
Was that 3 hours to 3 days, and then within 3 weeks, and then 3 months? Yeah, the decomposition phases.
That's crazy.
And I'm reading one of Patricia Cornwell's more recent books. I'm like 2 books behind, so I'm trying to catch back up because she has another one coming out this year. So actually just finished a portion where she's like describing an autopsy. So I got my notebook where I take things that like phrases, words, like things that I like or interesting facts. Like I'll start to jot them down. So I was like, step 1, autopsy. Step 2. Anyway.
So France used the guillotine for the last time in 1977. That's 1977. That wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
you were born. I was almost born.
Yeah. France abolished the death penalty in 1981. Now, in 1977, there are pictures because, France did public executions. That was their system.
Yeah.
The guillotine was put in the square. Like, that's where there are pictures of what happened that day. And I think for the first time, the mob that surrounded, because there were still spectators, thousands and thousands of people. They were crawling on the roofs. They were out the windows. Because people, it's like a train wreck. People need to stop and watch.
Yeah.
But I think for the first time, there was public outrage. Like, I know I wanted to watch it. Everybody knew what was going to happen. But the fact that when they saw it, they realized, that's not cool. That is terrible. And that was the last time they did it because they had so much backlash.
I mean, there would have been color news coverage.
Yeah, I think that was it too because the news was getting circulated.
Publicized, And
it was syndicated more thoroughly through France. And also it was jumping oceans and coming to us. And it made France look barbaric and behind the times. Yeah. So now today, beheading is outlawed in most countries, thank God. But it still exists in rare places. It actually there's a strict interpretation of it in Islamic law where they still do it. Saudi Arabia, for example, has used beheading for crimes like murder, drug trafficking.
Yeah.
However, even there, like, it is becoming less common, and it's due to the pressure of human rights groups. So beheading started as a tool of law and power. Fast, final, and symbolic. Over thousands of years, it moved from royal courts to revolutionary squares and finally to the history books. And it should be that way everywhere. So, and that is my intro on the fun topic of beheading.
Well, for legalizing beheading, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you how many cases that we've talked about, went over, we've heard about, where people are decapitated. And usually when they're dismembered, they're decapitated. Sometimes just decapitated, but if you're going to cut off the limbs, typically you also cut off the head. So.
Right.
So just as an extra warning, chatters, we're going to get graphic today.
Oh, boy.
Keep your heads about you, okay? Okay.
I have no idea who this person is. I don't know you.
You know, this story has been on our list since season 1.
Oh, okay.
And I don't remember if it's a request from a friend, like, early on. I just didn't write down who it was, or if it's something that I came across, because I do remember researching it before. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't as familiar, and honestly, it's not covered a lot. Okay. And I think part of that is because, 1, it was in early to mid-90s when it happened. 2, it was a military member, and he was prosecuted under Uniform Code of Military Justice. And not that those records aren't made public like the rest of the judicial systems, so they have to comply with most of that as well. It's just, there wasn't a whole lot out there, and a lot of it was kind of the same thing over and over again. So so I actually found the legal proceedings from everything to kind of help verify some of the information. And if there's any information that I wasn't sure about, or if I found conflicting information, I'll mention that in there. But you ready? Uh-huh. Keep your head about you.
Oh, wow. Really? Really? Keep your head about you. You're trying to be funny.
I gotta keep it lightheaded. Okay. So
lightheaded. Okay.
Well, okay. Some of the most intriguing life events happen within the hospital walls. Usually the first place that welcomes us and the last to bid us farewell. It holds some of the most joyous moments in our lives and some of the most terrifying, gruesome. And that's an understatement for today. So, wow. To Sergeant Steve Schap, commitments mattered. He took an oath to defend his country and joined the United States Army. He pledged faithfulness to his wife, Diane, and to his friends, he was the definition of loyal and trustworthy. Like, he put that forward. He had a very strong moral compass, strived to keep his moral compass, and he also expected those around him to do the same. But when that loyalty was broken and his trust was betrayed, Steve's actions, it was like a horror film. Screams echoing down the hospital hallways. No one ever would actually guess what happened. So, not much known about Steve's life, and I kind of mentioned that before. I listened to a couple podcasts, and I tried to stick to more like the factual information. He was described as quiet and smart, raised by a close-knit Catholic family. He was the oldest of 6 children. However, Steve's parents, John and Mary Ann, they divorced when he was 14 years old, and he had a hard time kind of dealing with that. Instead of withdrawing and, or acting out, he was so steadfast that when he got married, it's going to be for life. Divorce was never going to be an option.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, and that's kind of typical with being Catholic, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a very gifted student. He was actually named Student of the Year his senior year of high school. Stephen Schap, he went by Steve. He was known to be a man of purpose. He knew what he wanted. He wanted a good education. He wanted to land a good job. He wanted to find a woman that he could love and share all of that with. He went to college and studied English and psychology, and by 1990, he had all 3 of those things: an education, a job, and a lady. On a flight from London to Baltimore, I think it was over spring break of his senior year, he had met Diane, the love of his life. Steve was so excited that when they got off the plane, he couldn't wait to go home and tell his family about her. They began dating right away. They both lived in Baltimore. They just happened to be flying over from London at the same time. So they began dating, and Steve graduated college. He began working at the family business. Love-stricken from the beginning, he knew he wanted to spend his life with Diane. So within 6 months, they were married, 22 and 23 years old. And as timeless as any love story, bleh, kidding, vows were shared. And for Steve, it was an everlasting pledge. It was till death did them part. The newlyweds settled in Baltimore suburbs, and Steve was working for his father's construction company. They thought they had it all, but something felt missing. Little baby. Now, one day, Steve comes home from work to find Diane glowing. She was smiling from ear to ear, and she said that she was pregnant. Steve couldn't have been more overjoyed with his life at that point in time, and he really didn't care. Boy, girl, I just want a healthy baby, and we can have our family.
Oh, everything's sounding so sweet right now, but I know it's not going to stay that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So they started putting the nursery room together. You put the crib together. You start getting toys, clothes, diapers, and then devastation.
Oh, boy.
Diane miscarried.
Oh.
But Steve was determined that he and Diane have a family and they were going to try again soon. And as soon as she was ready, they did. He was ecstatic once again when Diane gave him the news that she was pregnant again. However, understandably, Diane was a little hesitant that she might have another miscarriage. He tried to reassure her like a good husband, gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't.
Oh.
Diane sadly miscarried again. And after a few months, they tried for a third time, but this third time wasn't a charm and just was another kind of blow in their face.
Oh, no. Oh.
Now, if you remember from the beginning, he was determined, he was purpose driven, he knew what he wanted, and children wasn't happening. So devastated, he grew very frustrated. He felt like a failure, like a disappointment. Diane, after 3 miscarriages, she didn't want to risk getting pregnant again. She said it was too much for her physically, emotionally, she didn't want to do it anymore. So she wanted to get her tubes tied. She wanted to have a tubal ligation. But Steve told her no. He said, I love you so much. I want to be the one to go through the pain and have a vasectomy so you don't have to go through it. And he was young. Doctors were really hesitant. He was only 24 at the time when he got a vasectomy. And they needed to make sure that he understood there was like a less than 1% chance that Diane was ever going to get pregnant again. And he said, you know what? I'm committed to Diane. I love her so much. I'm willing to give up the chance for us to have kids together. Trying to move on with their lives, Steve and Diane were ready for a fresh start. Steve decided to join the United States Army. I did find one source saying that he joined because he wanted to be able to spend more time with Diane, but that really doesn't make sense because he must have been either clueless or that was a misinterpretation because don't get more time with your family when you join the military. Sorry. Nice try, fly guy. Diane would later say that by December of 1991, she actually didn't have any feelings left for her husband. And considering a divorce, I think a lot of it was to do with the miscarriages and how he was not that he was controlling, but almost swallowing her, suffocating her. Maybe. That's just kind of my gist. That's kind of like my take on the things that I read. So she stuck it out. In 1992, after Steve graduated basic and technical training, he was assigned to Sickles Army Airfield in Fulda, Germany, in Deutschland, with the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I'm not Army, okay. 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment as a helicopter mechanic. They up and left their Baltimore friends and family. They also left behind the pain and torment of those miscarriages. They get to Germany. Steve thrived. He was successful at his job. He made some amazing friends, and one of his closest friends was a 21-year-old from Phoenix. His name was Gregory Glover. They shared music, talked about life, would pick on each other, that kind of thing. They just hit it off right away. So Greg would even come over and hang out at Steve and Diane's house. They had an apartment in Germany, have dinner, have some beers, that kind of thing. And life just really seemed like it was on the up and up for Steve and Diane. They kind of felt like this is it. This is what we were supposed to do. This is where we're supposed to be.
Right.
Steve worked up through the ranks. He was a hard worker. So from the outside looking in, it appeared that their lives had turned completely around. They even talked about adopting a boy and a girl. They have one of each. But for Diane, she told Steve that she wouldn't go through with the adoption until they worked on their communication. As a military spouse who was home all day in the middle of Germany's rural countryside, which is beautiful, amazing. But this is 1992 at the time. You didn't really have internet. There wasn't easy access of things, right? She had no family there. She had no friends. She had no children to care for. She was isolated.
Yeah.
They argued at times, and Diane would complain that she missed her family and friends. And as much as Steve tried to reassure her that things were all going to work out, Diane still could not help but feel lonely. Like a good friend, State Farm is there. Greg would listen to Steve about his issues at home because they work together. And that's typical, especially when you go overseas in a military community, the first people you become friends with are your neighbors or the people that you work with. Sometimes your neighbors are also, you don't want any association with them at all.
Right.
So I was just talking to somebody the other day who's fairly new to the military and was like, are all spouses like this? They just kind of get that bad. Not all of them.
They get clicky?
Yeah. Like, if they don't like you, you're never going in their circle. And it's just it's like a high school popularity contest. But anyway, I said, no, they're not all like that. But there's a handful.
Yeah.
Good luck. So Greg would listen to Steve at work about the issues at home, and it bothered Steve that Diane wasn't happy. It really did. It really bothered him. Like, I don't know what else I can do to make my wife happy. And he suggested that she find something to occupy her time. Still, he stayed optimistic about their future, and Steve actually never would have guessed that the something she wanted to occupy her time with would lead to betrayal. After all, Steve is devoted to Diane, steadfast in his vows. Diane, on the other hand, don't want to adopt children. We need to work on our communication. She had some different feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. In the summer of 1993, Steve went to a month-long platoon leader training course in the United States. So I guess he offered, I heard some sources say this, and well, like, hey, why don't you come home with me? You're missing home. Yeah. You don't have any friends here, or just come home with me. I've got to go to, I don't remember if you went to like Georgia or Texas. You go to Baltimore,
right.
And, I'll see you in a month. Well, she was volunteering at the base legal office, like helping the paralegals out and everything like that. She just started, so she didn't want to leave.
Okay. So it was her decision.
It was her decision, yes. Okay. But while he was gone, Diane, now 26 years old, realized that not really a whole lot was keeping her in the marriage, but feeling guilty about not being in the marriage anymore. Steve returned from his month-long training. He actually came home a day early, and he was hoping to surprise her, but he comes home to an empty house. Okay. And you know how that is. Like, it just seems off.
Yeah.
Like, something's not adding up here.
Oh, boy.
So he waits for Diane to come home, starts to question her, where have you been? Tensions start to rise, and Diane tells Steve it's not working out. I think it's best that we get a divorce. Like, this isn't going to work out for me. Completely blindsided by this, Steve spent weeks trying to work on their issues. He was always steadfast to his loyalty to Diane, and he just begged, can we just work on this? I mean, there's one side, the other side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. Yeah. But that one side of the story of what else was she going through just really wasn't known. Yeah. Yet. No. Steve later said, quote, I have never heard her speak those words to me before. It required me to dig deep down inside to try to appreciate the situation. I was feeling very incoherent, end quote. Wow. But for Diane, it was a little too late. She said, quote, there was too much hurt. It was too late to try and change things, end quote. So she's like, nothing's going to change. Might as well give it up while we're still young. And he said, no. But it's going to go one way or the other. Somebody's going to win. He was willing, Steve, to do whatever it took to keep them together. After all he wanted, marriage was forever. But even Steve came to the realization that he wasn't going to win the battle. And he did agree to a separation process. Over the Thanksgiving weekend of 1993, the couple talked about the details of the separation and divorce, kind of like how they were going to go about it. Smart, really. Uh-huh. Like, if you both emotionally have come to this agreement, let's sit down and let's figure out how it's going to work out best for both of us without it being contentious or anything like that. Uh-huh. Ultimately, they did agree to separate, and she was going to return early back to the United States. On December 6th, 1993, so like a week or so after Thanksgiving, the couple met with the regimental chaplain to discuss separation and begin the process of sending Diane back to the States. When the chaplain asked if infidelity was an issue in their breakup, both parties said no. But he was torn emotionally. And like I said, he felt like a failure. He felt devastated. And after even meeting with the chaplain, he kind of flipped a switch and he's like, no, I need to make this work. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to let her go.
Oh boy.
So at some point in that time frame, somewhere around December 6th to December 7th, which is what we're going to get into. So Steve comes across Diane's journal, her diary. And apparently in there, it outlined some passionate love affairs with other men. When he confronted her about it, she said, oh, it was just a fantasy. It was just something I was thinking about, wanting to do, not to worry. Apparently, Steve kind of brushed it off at first, but then his suspicions started to grow very quickly. He called his father John, and according to his dad, he said, quote, he said he had discovered his wife had been unfaithful, not only in Germany, but back in Baltimore before and during marriage, end quote. So John would do like what any dad would do and advise to go talk to somebody. So Steve, one close friend in mind that he could think of was Greg Glover. Uh-huh. On December 7th, 1993, while at work, That morning, apparently Steve had given Greg a ride. So Greg lived in the barracks, but Steve, because he was married, lived in like the housing. Steve tells Greg that he thinks Diane's cheating on him and says, I can't give up. I want this to work. Greg was really surprised. I mean, he was a close friend to both of them and says, how do you know? He's like, I don't know. I just know. I just have a feeling. So when Greg asked then who he thought the other man was, Steve was like, I don't know, at least not yet. Later that morning, Diane had checked herself into a local German hospital. She had an acquaintance of hers. For some reason, she didn't go to the base hospital. She went to like a local German hospital called Juice Krankenhaus that morning. So she woke up, she found out that she was bleeding. She's like, oh no, what happened? So she goes to the hospital. She calls to the clerk at the legal office where she volunteers at and lets them know what's going on. And she asks them to pass the message on for her. Later in that morning, Steve coincidentally stopped by the legal office to obtain some paperwork in connection with like their marital separation, everything like that. That same legal clerk that talked to Diane on the phone says, hey, your wife's in the hospital. So he's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Naturally, he rushed there. He went to check on her, and he thought that it could have been that Diane was having problems because she had issues with ovarian cysts, which are common with women. So he gets there. She's like, hey, I'm okay, but I need to tell you something. Now, about a month prior, she found out she was pregnant. With her bleeding and her past history of miscarriages, it was very concerning for her. The doctors actually wanted to keep her for observation for a week. So she's like, I can't not tell him. I'm going to be in the hospital for a week.
Oh
so she knew she had to come clean.
Oh my God.
And if you remember, Steve had a vasectomy.
Yeah.
And there was no way Diane could get pregnant, at least not by Steve. Apparently, Steve took the news unexpectedly well. He showed concern over her, over the baby. He said, I'm not even going to ask who the father is. I just want you to be okay. He later said, quote, what I was doing was trying to be strong for my wife. Inside, I fell to pieces.
Yeah.
I was extremely upset, but I was extremely worried, end quote. He even offered to go home, get her clothes, toiletries, since she was going to be there for a week. Diane was relieved. Like, you are taking this amazing.
Like, sadly, because she seems like a real twisted.
Well,
Diane is not a good person.
Yeah, I mean,
as bad as he may get.
Yeah.
The fact that she is screwing around in Baltimore, the fact that she's writing this down.
Well,
a cheater. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no indication that that actually happened. That's just what Steve was saying. That's what Steve told his dad.
Okay.
So, you can't prove it, right?
Yeah, well, I guess not.
Obviously, being pregnant by another man is proof in itself.
Yeah, but it's a low. I could see that being a very low blow to somebody who was having issues. Yeah. That must have broke his heart. So I kind of feel bad for him right now. Because, I mean, the one thing you shouldn't do while you're getting out of a marriage that you couldn't have kids with this man is get pregnant and rub his face in it. Like, get out neatly. Diane seems like a sloppy type of woman. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think that she was young, too, and she just didn't she didn't know what she wanted.
Yeah, it was fine.
Really,
just put a condom on. What the hell? Right. You gotta fuck around, put a condom on. She's a little sloppy.
Should fuck around and find out.
Right, and she's gonna find out, I guess. I'm assuming, I don't know.
So she did feel relieved, but she also told Steve, and she needed to make it clear to him, this doesn't mean we're getting back together. Like, we're still separating.
Yeah, she should have never went.
Still both going our own ways.
She should have never went to Germany if she really felt that way.
Yeah. So Steve leaves the hospital. Presumably he's going to go home and get the things for Diane that he said he was going to. About an hour later, he comes back. He's fucking pissed.
Oh boy.
He's been stewing on it.
Boy.
He's more agitated and was demanding answers left and right.
Yeah.
Is it somebody we know? Is it somebody I know? Who is it?
I would ask the same questions.
Oh my God, yes.
I would grill them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Diane was like, Steve, stop yelling. But things just kind of got really superheated. And, it gets that whole, how could you do this to me? Diane saying, I don't love you anymore. He demanded at this point to say, who's the father? She never said who he was, but through their kind of contentious argument at that point in time, she did say that he was a specialist in the Army and that she left a message for him at the legal office to let him know she was in the hospital and she might have a miscarriage. So then Steve asks, well, where did you have sex? Diane said in their apartment on the living room floor. So Steve, again, he's like increasingly getting more agitated and frustrated and pissed.
His life was violated by a stranger.
Yeah.
Even if,
he's like,
let's say, even if you don't love your partner, there are many marriages that you fall in and out of love.
Sure.
That's why marriage has rules. You never dishonor your partner, even when you're going through hard times. And Diane swept this, like, she did a number on him. So I know that he's probably going to do something horrible, but she's horrible right now. I don't like her.
Well, it's called The Bold and the Beheaded, so.
Oh, that's true. Oh, poor Diane. Okay, well, I don't feel bad for her right now.
So Diane said they had sex on the living room floor. Steve, pissed, is like, I can't live there anymore. He left the hospital again, saying that he was going to go back and pack his things. Understandable. He stormed out of the hospital.
I would burn her stuff. No, just joking. Just joking. It's a joke. I wouldn't do anything.
He did go home. He packed clothes, packed his passport. For some reason, he was taking like financial records. He got money. But he also packed a couple copies of Diane's diary. So another source I read or I listened to said that Steve at one point chucked the diary. Like he got rid of it. But he made copies of it before he did so.
Ooh, smart.
So maybe like in the back of his head, he's going, I need to just in case kind of thing. He also at some point packed an 8-inch fighting knife. With all of this, there's only one thing that was left on his mind, and that was finding the man that Diane had an affair with and knocked her up. Mm-hmm. Steve immediately drove to the barracks, approached the staff duty non-commissioned officer, and said that there's a legal clerk who was here that my wife talked to and looking for a room. I need to find that same room. The NCO was like, well, who is it that you're looking for? Steve was like, of course he doesn't know the name. He's like, forget it. And he leaves. Mm-hmm. Now, the legal clerk actually did find the right room, slipped the message underneath the door, and then also had this person paged. Other friends and coworkers called to check on Diane, including their friend Greg. Uh-huh. She said that she was afraid of what Steve would do, and she was terrified. After all, it's Greg, Steve's best friend, who's the father.
Oh, I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Now, per Diane, this came later, she said Greg was excited, and he wanted to be very involved as the father of the child. She also said that he was concerned about her health, has history of miscarriages and everything like that. And Greg was getting ready to actually move to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So probably in Diane's brain, she's going, get this divorce. We don't have to tell him I'm pregnant. I'll go with you.
Oh my God.
And we can just forget this whole, the whole Steve thing ever happened.
So she's running away from her problems and she's with one man and jumping to another.
That's my kind of what I put together.
Yeah.
It didn't come out and actually like say that, but I mean, it's just kind of like, people and their behaviors, right? And kind of how they act. Yeah.
And also that he's getting hit with a double whammy. His best friend that he's been confiding in about her cheating, possibly cheating. So he's in on it. Oh yeah, my head would explode. Something would go down. I mean, I wouldn't be violent like that, but I would be screaming. I don't know.
Oh no, absolutely. The worst kind of betrial.
Oh yeah, all of her stuff would be in the dumpster. I'm sorry.
On fire!
I was just thinking about that song. Oh boy. Okay,
so Diane's talking to Greg. They talked for about 5-10 minutes discussing about, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to work through this. Diane said that she heard Greg swearing twice, but the second time it was kind of cut off mid-breath and the line went dead. Uh-huh. Within like 30 minutes, Diane was actually going to find out why. Witnesses said that they heard shouts and cries for help, and initially they're like, oh, they're just fucking around. They're like horsing around.
Yeah.
The cries started to come a little bit more intense, and some of the soldiers started kind of like peeking out from their barracks, coming out of the dining hall, going, what's going on? They described a man's actions, initially slow and rhythmic, like prey, like hunting prey. The aggressor straddled and overpowered the other man. Witnesses quickly realized that they weren't playing when the man on top repeatedly started to stab the other one and began to saw through his neck.
Oh my God.
Okay. Skip forward about 15 seconds because it's going to get nasty. The head was almost completely severed when the assailant began to kick it until it separated from the body and jolted about 10 or 15 feet away.
Are you fucking kidding? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Witnesses saw the assailant kick the head up by its hair and walk around. The assailant, I'm sure you know, is Steve. The victim is Greg. You see, by this time, Steve had deduced, he had put it all together. He made his investigative deductions that it was Greg was the one having an affair with Diane. When he first found out, he was acting calm and normal. Like when he first figured it out, I guess. He was acting calm, normal, went near the barracks by the dining facility and started asking people, hey, have you seen Glover? Have you seen Greg? One soldier informed him that Greg was on the telephone at the booth right next to the dining facility. Apparently said, well, I guess he got the message. Then he went and found Greg on the phone and attacked him, which is what Diane, not knowing what she heard at the time, but that's what Diane heard on the other end. A few witnesses rushed right away to call military police witnessing this. It didn't scare Steve. At trial, one of the witnesses said that the assailant had turned, looked at them, holding the victim's head up and saying, this is what you get for adultery.
Oh.
Like threatening, almost like threatening the other soldiers and going like, this is what you get when you commit adultery.
Wow.
This is what happens. You lose your head.
Oh, boy.
So one of those witnesses was Anthony Penny, Greg's friend and roommate he shared the barracks with. He just witnessed his friend get beheaded. He later testified, Anthony Penny, at court and said that Greg's beheaded is in Steve's hand. Anthony comes up and is like, what are you doing? And he looks at him and he's like, he even said he was sorry. And look what he still got. He still got beheaded.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And apparently other witnesses also said, like, as Steve was stabbing him, that he was saying, I'm sorry. Like, other witnesses did hear him say that as well.
Yeah.
Anthony stayed with Greg's headless body until the MPs arrived and kind of secured the scene. Greg was stabbed about 15 times, which included a slash to the throat, not the one that beheaded him, but other slashes, a punctured lung, and a severed carotid artery. Now, according to later testimony, Greg's throat, the slash to the throat was actually what they called the kill wound. That's what actually made him stop and stop fighting back and everything like that. That's when Steve decapitated him, once he stopped fighting. Back at the scene, Steve's got Greg's head in his hand. He goes back to his car.
He left with the head?
He left with the head. Oh, it gets better.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So he changed clothes, places Greg's head in his gym bag, which was in his car.
Nobody stopped him.
Nobody stopped him. I know. Well, obviously he leaves before MPs get there.
Right, but it's like, else.
But it's like the Good Samaritan law. Like, stop him from leaving. And I think at that point in time, people were probably just so fucking freaked out. Like,
yeah.
Did I just see what I saw?
Right.
And it's, what is that thing? The witness thing that we talked about? Like, if there's a group of people and you see something, you don't want to be that one to actually interrupt and say there's, wow, what is it called?
Not the bystander.
Yeah, the bystander effect. Exactly. That was probably going on too.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Where does Steve go with Greg's head? Back to the hospital.
Oh, boy.
Now, Diane testified that she could hear stomps coming from down the hallway get louder and louder and louder. And as soon as Steve got to the door, she's like, oh, it's Steve. He was speckled in blood, carrying a gym bag over his shoulder. It had been actually about 4 hours from the first thing that happened when Diane said, I'm pregnant and it's not your baby, to Steve walking into the hospital.
Okay.
So he opens the bag, pulls out Greg's head. Now, some reports say that his head was in a plastic bag, like a transparent bag, maybe a grocery bag, something like that. They don't really have I guess they kind of do, but the plastic bag, some kind of plastic bag where you would be able to see what's actually inside of it. Other reports didn't say that. Either way, apparently Steve was holding Greg's head up by the hair. This is what Steve is quoted as saying. Look, Diane, Glover's here.
Oh, shit.
He'll sleep with you every night now. Only you won't sleep because all you'll see is this.
Oh, my God. He snapped.
He snapped. Snap.
He snapped.
Snap.
Snap. This is like psychotic break.
Yes.
Wow.
So at trial, Diane testified that Steve had Greg's head in both of his hands and tried to push it into her face. Her screams, in terror, drew, obviously, hospital workers, doctors, nurses, where they had come in and they found Diane, pale, covered in blood, which is also why I think that his head wasn't necessarily in a plastic bag. Because if it's in a plastic bag, it's not going to be... The description of the hospital there was that she was bloody. Like she was covered in blood kind of thing. So, I don't know. So, they get in there, see Diane, pale, see the blood, find Steve calmly sitting at the foot of Diane's bed, and then on the bedside table, they find a head of Greg Glover, intentionally facing Diane.
Oh my God.
Reportedly, Steve told the doctors, "Oh, good, you're here. I've got something I need to say."
Oh my God.
Now, it was about 20 minutes from the time Steve pulled out the head to the time he was in handcuffs, but in that 20 minutes, he held very rational conversations with the doctors. They closed the door, and they said, we're going to call the police. And they're like, yep, go ahead. I'm not going to resist.
Right.
I need to say what happened here. He was more than happy to talk about how his wife cheated on him, best friend. Yeah. She's pregnant with his baby, and that he just was betrayed by two of the people that he trusted most.
Yeah.
I guess with Greg's head just kind of like sitting there, one of the doctors kind of started to get sick and wanted to cover the head up with a towel, but Steve objected. He's like, oh, no. Diane needs to look at that head. He felt cheated, felt betrayed. Yeah. Now, at the trial, Dr. Haberman, he was one of the doctors that was there, he said that once Steve began to talk about what was going on, he didn't really feel threatened anymore. He just was like, Steve just wanted to get it off his chest. Yeah. And he was cooperative. He didn't resist arrest, anything. Yeah. While in the hospital, he also told Diane that she gave him enough clues that he had figured it out. Diane testified that within those 20 minutes, Steve said, quote, I studied this. I planned this. I calculated this. I did this for you. I love you. Oh, boy. Diane was actually treated for shock, but both she and the baby were okay. Okay. So the next day, he's in custody. He calls his dad, John, back in Baltimore, and he allegedly said, quote, Dad, I'm sorry I let you down. I wasn't strong enough, end quote. Aww. So that was December 7th, 1993. January 25th, 1994, Steve was charged with premeditated murder and would face a military court-martial in Germany. February 3rd, his first court appearance, he pleaded not guilty to premeditated murder, and the trial was actually going to begin within the next month. Now, that's another thing about military trials. It's very similar to like the civilian judicial system. Somebody is in pretrial confinement. They do have the right to a quick and speedy trial. Military does have a tendency to be expeditiously speedy. Maybe in these circumstances like this where you have confessed, there's witnesses. It's like a nail in the coffin, for lack of better terms. So March 10th, 1994, Steve underwent psychiatric evaluation panel by 3 psychiatrists, and it was reported that Steve was mentally sound, suffered no physical problems, but was in a rage when he killed Greg. They also said that Steve scored in the 98th percentile on the IQ test. I don't know what his score was, but he was in the 98th percentile. Okay. He also had obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Interviews with Steve revealed that he was a man with high, rigid moral standards, strong family values. One of the evaluators, Dr./Major Carol Diebold, said that Steve repressed his emotions. Typical. Honestly, typical for military. Yeah, repressed emotions. And what do? You keep it all locked in. That's why you get it out a little bit at a time. That's a great. Yeah, a little bit at a time. Yes. She said, quote, an obsessive-compulsive person often puts up a facade or front that makes them look cool or calm, end quote. His most significant psychological complication, the panel concluded, was posed by his marital problems. Jury selection began on March 28th, 1994, and trial started right away. There was no, pause in between, we got a jury? Okay, let's go. Do this. Right. Opening arguments, prosecution called Steve a cold, calculated killer. Steve looked for Greg for over an hour, which they argued was plenty of time for premeditation to change his mind and, what he was actually going to do. And if convicted, the mandatory sentence is life imprisonment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Yeah. So the defense, however, said that it was an act of passion, that he was triggered by the betrayal and then snapped when he saw Greg, and they did fight for voluntary manslaughter. At no point in time did Steve ever deny. He did plead not guilty, but that was because he was being charged with premeditated murder. So he pled not guilty to premeditated murder. So the courtroom was packed. There was 2 rows filled by members of the Schap family who came over from Baltimore. The jury, 4 officers and 3 enlisted, listened to this bizarre and gruesome tale, and the trial took 1 week. Friends and family testified on Steve's behalf, saying how good of a husband and friend he is. Steve also testified at his trial that when he saw Greg on the phone, standing in the phone booth outside of the barracks at the dining hall, he immediately got physically incapacitated. Things got very narrow. He no longer saw Greg, that it was his friend standing there. Basically, he got tunnel vision. It was just like that audio exclusion. He didn't say this, but it's like seeing red. Steve said when he came back to the hospital room with Greg's head, he felt unclean and just wanted to hold Diane. It was reported that the most emotion Steve showed during trial was when Diane testified on the behalf of the prosecution. She refused to look at him. She never looked at him once. She was wearing a loose-fitting dress that tried to conceal her 6-month pregnancy. Diane spoke with a soft but firm voice and only lost her composure once. Try to find out what that one time was. It might have been when the head was there, but I couldn't find it. April 2nd, 1994, after 2 hours of deliberation, jurors found Sergeant Stephen Schap, Twister, Schap Schnapt, found him guilty of premeditated murder in violation of Article 118, Uniform Code of Military Justice. After his conviction, Steve spoke to the court saying, quote, "I'm sorry, I'm the man responsible," end quote. And he did apologize to Greg's mother, Irene, who was there, and said, "I know what it means to be without loved ones." I don't know.
No, don't relate like that. That's weird. No.
I felt gross
Yeah.
when I saw that. No. Like, no, that's icky. So members of the jury recommended, this is also military court-martial works a little bit differently. They do sentencing, but sentencing, the jury makes a recommendation to the judge. It's called the convening authority. And the convening authority is the one that makes that determination. Now, this could be related to, you know, it's like a month and you come back for sentencing. Sometimes sentencing is only like a week later or whatever. Or it's a different hearing, but that's where the judge decides. Similar, a little different. So members of the jury recommended a dishonorable discharge, confinement for life, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and a reduction to private, which is an E1. Although the mandatory sentencing guidelines in the manual for courts-martial does say premeditated murder is life in prison, given the circumstances, the jury actually asked for some leniency. Like, we understand it's for life, but 5 of the jurors asked the court-martial convening authority to set the maximum sentence at 30 years. A 6th juror said 20 years. The 7th juror apparently didn't say anything about it. Like, he was all down for life. The convening authority, the judge, had 60 days to decide. On June 15th, 1994, the convening authority ordered Steve's sentence as a dishonorable discharge, confinement for 45 years, forfeiture for all pay and allowances, and a reduction to private E1. That's the other thing is, like, even with the life sentence that would have been mandatory, he would have been eligible for parole in 10 years, even with premeditated murder in that military system. July 6, 1994, Steve and Diane are divorced. The records were showing, apparently, that Steve is the one that filed. Fine, I'll give you what you want. April 5th, 2017, Steve is released on parole from Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. 8 years ago. So he served for 23 years in prison. Both Steve and Diane's whereabouts are unknown. And what I've read and like what people talk, like nobody knows where they are, which is good.
Yeah.
Obviously, the government probably knows where Steve is.
Yeah.
If he's on parole, he has to check in, that kind of thing. But honestly, if I was Diane, I would have changed my name.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You're living in Germany. And this was, it was international news. It was heavily covered in the States, obviously. So I would totally change my name.
Wow.
Apparently, she did have the baby, presumably. Nobody really knows. So this story goes beyond the realm of a classic love triangle, found in a typical soap opera, one that often takes place in hospital halls. This one, however, is surrounded by the emotional distress, devastation, miscommunication, humiliation, and a violent and tragic ending only produced by the story of the bold and the beheaded.
Oh, gosh.
I almost said bold and the beautiful. And that is the story for today.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Horrifying. Yeah. I get that he snapped. And so there's quite a few Reddits on this. I actually did see one person on there who said, I went to high school with Greg. I know, the victim, the beheaded in the story, and kind of talked about how quiet he was. He kept to himself a lot, that he was 21, 22 at the time. Diane was 26. She was a little older. he'd never really been dated in high school. Maybe this was like his first, like, and she probably manipulated him.
Yeah.
She took advantage of it and probably, manipulated him because he's like, wow, she's pretty and I've never, like, I'm not used to this attention, and
that's terrible. Diane
she's not
destroyed
happy.
2 men. I mean, obviously he destroyed him, but like, my heart goes out to Greg and the family. What he did to Greg is just disgusting and horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But if, like, just like Diane definitely played with fire there.
Sure.
And I think, like you said, like, her actions definitely led to his death. So, yeah.
And I think she probably felt that way, maybe.
And she knew, because why did she go to an outside hospital? She was trying to keep things under wraps because she didn't want, if she went to the hospital on the base, he would immediately be notified that his wife is in the hospital.
He would have known.
So she sneaky, and she didn't think she was going to get caught this way, but, you know.
I mean, she's a manipulator, you know. Obviously, Greg is truly the victim all the way around in this story. He was just trying to be a good friend. I do think that when Steve was confiding in him, so with the storyline, in the kind of the summertime is when Steve goes back to the States for his training. That is apparently when she and Greg hooked up the first time.
Right.
This all happened in December. She found out in October she was pregnant.
Yeah, why was she in Germany?
Yeah.
Why? If she knew she was leaving him, the love is gone, so that gives me a golden ticket to cheat on my husband. Yep. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And why did you go to Germany if you knew this was coming to a close?
Mm-hmm.
Because she probably couldn't be alone because she was one of those women.
Yeah.
You know?
He swept her off her feet, but it didn't turn out the way that she wanted to. I mean,
she was just going to man jump from one man to another man to another man.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's definitely a story made for nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, especially your description of him doing it, like that was eerie.
So I have a lot of like newspaper clippings, but there's really not a whole lot of pictures anywhere.
That's
creepy.
But
there are a bunch of news articles and stuff that are available for our patrons.
Okay, well, thank you, Kat, for that. Very graphic story.
The bold and the beautiful. You know what I was thinking? So I told you we were watching like House in the Pit, and all of this stuff happened in a hospital, and it's a drama, and it's a soap opera. It's like,
oh my God. Yeah. Oh. Ugh. Well, because I don't leave you hanging, chatters. For more information on this case, please check out After That Crime Chat, only available on Patreon.
Leave ya hanging. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, CrimeChat with Nat and Kat on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X, and Rumble now. So see what we got going on.
Yes, remember, CrimeChat with Nat and Kat. When you become a VIP chatter to our Patreon, you'll have access to bonus episodes, behind the scenes, bloopers, and free merch, and check out some merch in the works.
Yes, and be sure to check out our next episode, I believe, is a skip week, and we haven't decided what we're going to say.
Like the story? We'll figure it out. Okay. Well, you don't want to miss it either way.
All right, we'll see you next time, chat.
Bye.